I think people in this room would know Kraken. How many of you get your energy from Octopus? Hands up. How many of you have EVs that are charged up through Octopus's offerings? Okay, so you've got pretty good awareness. Not everyone.
I'm going to extend it as well. Who gets their electricity from E.ON, EDF, and Good Energy as well? Okay, so we've got a few more people in the room that.
Okay, yeah, that's true. We are at an international conference, so absolutely. And of course, just by way of context, Octopus is a leading electricity provider, not only in the UK, but with a footprint in multiple countries around the world, including now in the US, where you're active. And Kraken is the technology brain behind Octopus, with a strong focus on AI, but with an emphasis on making markets more flexible, more responsive. And so I'm very interested in this. As a longtime advocate, my first book was called Power to the People 20 years ago, where I advocated a much more flexible and nimble electricity system. We finally seem to have the technology and the capabilities to make this a viable business proposition. How far have you come? Can you give us a quick snapshot of what has been achieved with the application of AI to the grid? And then we can talk about the energy needs of AI itself next. But
Sure.
Give us an idea, because not everyone will be appraised of the latest fact. Because every 6 months I check in with your company, I'm astonished at how much more flexible demand you're able to integrate through your various offerings. Where have you got to now?
Of course, and if I may, I'll take a long step back, because
Sure.
I'd like to find analogies to describe the problems of the energy system. And this morning, traveling in, I thought transport is probably a good analogy, because a lot of you would have suffered the 9 a.m. peak getting through London. And when we think about transportation, energy systems and transportation roughly started at the same time in the UK. We started building our motorways, our A roads, and the grid roughly the same time, Victorian era developments. And one thing this will help me is to introduce some of the terminology, which we'll probably get into a lot of jargon. We talk about the transmission system in the UK and globally. That's the motorway. That's how you transport electricity from large-scale generation to urban areas, like motorways link big urban areas together. Then you go to your A roads you get off the motorway, you go to the A road, and it takes you all the way to your home. That's the distribution network. If you're living in a rural area, that's the poles and wires. If you're in London, they're all underground. The first train station, as it turns out, in London was in Greenwich in 1850s, 60s. The first underground Metropolitan line, which is what I took this morning, was 1860. And as it turns out, the first power station in London was the Edison Light and Electric, which was just down the road here in Farringdon, that burned coal and generated electricity for the London area. Now, when we look at transportation, it has come a long way. Especially in the recent era, it fired up new business models, Google Maps, Waze. It created Uber that allowed that democratization of transportation. It built a forecasting model of when you book cars, as opposed to having to call or get out into the street and hope for a black cab to show up. And more recently, the transportation sector has autonomous vehicles. I was in San Francisco last week, used Waymo for the first time. It's pretty cool.
That was you in the back of the Waymo. I thought you looked familiar. Okay,
and it was a thing of science fiction 10 years ago. We talked about it, but we didn't believe it would happen. So transportation has moved from a system of engineering solutions that we build things and assume people will be able to use them in the way it was meant to a system that we optimize and we try and get more out of, and inform consumers to use the system different. Because if you go into your Google Maps and say, I want to go from X destination to this event, it would have given you a few options to choose from. In electricity, we still run the system based on peak load. And apologies for the sports analogy, in the UK, one of the case studies we talk about is the FA Cup halftime, when everybody goes to their kitchen, flicks on the kettle to have a cup of tea. And God forbid that doesn't happen. So we designed the whole system big enough to generate that much electricity, carry it through the whole system so we can all have a cup of tea. And it's not a UK problem. In Australia, it's the opposite. It's Christmas Day, when all industry is off, people are out having their barbecues, there's no demand on the system. And that's how we designed it. And that model does not work anymore. Because today we have rooftop solar, changes our behavior of usage. We are buying heat pumps in small numbers today, but that changes the behavior. The most important is electrification of transportation, which is why I'm coming back to transport. Because when you have an electric vehicle, suddenly you create, unless we use AI to better optimize that, we create that new peak between 4 to 7 p.m., which is when the traditional peak is, that we would have to build a transportation system or distribution system that's so large that we, one, don't have the roads, the ability to do the public works or the capital, or would make it so expensive that we would give up on energy transition. And the solution to that is to start incorporating the owners of those heat pumps, domestic batteries, and EVs to become part of the energy system. We have to build a consumer-centric system.
Just to bring that point home, in order to avoid this problem where we overbuild the electricity systems for 1 hour a year, right? That's the problem. We have to build for peak. We have most of the time is inefficient, it's fallow. We can time shift, right? Yes. Or sometimes the nerds call it peak shaving. If we can shift at when the grid is about to go into overload, a small percentage of the load, we would save a huge amount of the resources. We'd avoid blackouts and brownouts and so on. And those savings can actually be saved, can be shared with consumers themselves.
Correct.
So changing behavior. Now, this was a brilliant idea a couple of decades ago when I argued this on the pages of The Economist and in a book. But the technology wasn't quite there. Real-time meters were clunky, and nobody wanted to actually do this. Nobody wants to be an energy day trader. You just want your stuff to work. A great energy guru by the name of Amory Lovins argued to me at the time. He said, "Look, people want cold beer and hot showers. Nobody cares about electrons." And he was an energy expert who believed in all of this. So that was the fallacy that I fell foul of. What's different now that someone with an EV or a heat pump or any of these whizzy technologies doesn't feel like, you're asking me to make another bunch of choices. My life is already complicated. Now this guy from Kraken wants me to spend my whole day worrying about how to save half a penny and when to charge my car and my kettle. Why can't I just live my life? Why do you want to burden us like this?
Hot showers, cold beers, cheap range when you need it, comfortable home for good economics. That's what consumers want. They're not interested in trading.
Exactly.
I was actually looking at a slide by my team that showed that there's probably over 30 ways that you can trade the energy markets today. No consumer wants to deal with that. We have to give consumers really simple, transparent propositions, but always give them control to decide how they consume those. So what we have done at Kraken and our customers, EDF and Octopus use, Avangrid in the US, is a very simple product that allows them to design tariffs, very customized tariffs for their consumers to bring them into the energy system. The first step of that is a really simple user experience. Here's an app, sign up, and register your car, your battery, your heat pump onto this. And then ask the consumer one simple question: what would you like to have? And the consumer say, I like my car to be charged by 80% by 7 a.m. tomorrow morning. And with that action, the utility has just unlocked 9 to 14 hours of flexibility. That's the right to decide when is the best time to charge that car. And the typical charging is going to be 2 to 3 hours, maybe 2 to 3 times a week. They can choose the cheapest electricity, which happens to be the greenest. They can choose to charge when the distribution grid is not constrained. Congestion charging in London was an amazing tool to get a lot more out of the roads. This is the same enabling for utilities to do that. Now, the benefit to the user, in the case of Octopus, is a 60% discount on the car charging. Now, to put that in real terms, that's 2 pence per mile. So a trip to Manchester would be £4. If you chose an alternative mode of driving, it'll be closer to £20. And if you chose a train, it'll be £90 if you booked it at off-peak and a single rate that you can use during the day. And that's where it becomes very sticky, because the consumer gets a very simple proposition, cheap range,
right?
And the utility has the ability to optimize that consumption and make this actually a really good business model for the utility to deploy.
What are the challenges? In other markets, I presume regulation is a problem, incumbent utilities, old-fashioned mindsets, or that technology isn't ready yet. You've given us the rosy picture of what you've been able to do. I know the real story, the sausage making, is always a lot tougher. Give us a quick flavor of what are some of the big challenges that you're still grappling with.
Yep. The biggest challenge as we're deploying this broadly around the world is trust. Um, the the our industry, the utility industry, has not always had the best relationship with its consumers, and that's competitive markets or regulated markets that like those in the US. Edelman's runs an annual survey called the trust parameter, and utilities always end up measuring on the wrong side of that. And I think you can build trust by good tech that gives consumers what they want. You can build it by giving them absolute transparency of what's happening. Like on the product I talked about called SmartFlex, consumers always have a button saying, ignore what the utility wanted, charge my car now. And that's helped. So repeating that message, demonstrating that the value is there and it works, helps. The regulation is the other side of it. The whole world in energy is designed to operate a generation-based system. Its incentives are for big power generators, not for consumers to participate. And we do a lot of work with regulators in the UK and globally to help us change regulation and open the way for consumers to become an active participant in the energy system.
One of the questions on Slido does ask about countries where there have less supplier choice. I think you kind of answered that a bit. You need to have some choice and competition for these technologies to advance, if I'm not mistaken.
And whether you're a regulated monopolistic utility or not, you still grapple with the same problems. The generation mix is changing, so you have to run your system differently. You have to find ways of engaging your consumers to create the flexibility into the new generation mix, which is less flexible because it's driven by nature.
So there's a good skeptical question saying, are you just sort of cherry picking here, a couple of low-hanging fruits? Is this flexibility, does it hold its scale as you get bigger? Is it just a couple of megawatts of energy you're talking about here and there where you save a few pennies?
I hope not. And we have early demonstrations that it's not. Today, the portfolio we manage is 1.6 gigawatts. That really translates into 2 gigawatt hours of generation that we flexibly manage every day. To give you a sense, a home would use about 10 kilowatt hours a day. So that's worth of 200,000 homes.
So we're talking the scale of 1 or 2 nuclear power plants output made up of all of these distributed micro generators and EVs and heat pumps and so on. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so just think about this. I mean, so I think that's a very important proof point. Obviously, that we need to see what further scale effects are. But once you're talking on the scale of a couple of nuclear power plants, it seems to me that there's a case here to answer for those who say it can't be done.
Absolutely.
Now, I want to come to the audience in just a minute, but I do want to talk about AI and the load demands that AI is putting. I've already given the dimensioning according to the IEA, the official numbers on this. AI is not the leading push or leading cause of increasing electricity consumption in the world. Having said that, it is nevertheless an important marginal force for power, and one that's willing to pay and overpay for clean sources of power, right? We've seen that with the big tech companies wanting to try to at least honor some aspect of their net zero commitments, willing to engage in clean energy, pay more for nuclear or pay more for geothermal and so on than might the marketplace. How do you see the challenge from the AI load factor here?
So we've been working with data centers for a while, and the challenge of data centers thus far has been their base load. They run all the time at the same level with very little flexibility. The data centers that are focused on training AI models, or similar with those who farm crypto, is they bring a level of flexibility in their operation that allows them to be better fit into the existing generation mix. They can put latency. So if the NVIDIA chips actually have a parameter that tells it use less power now.
Right.
And that allows us to modulate how much power is consumed by the data center. They can delay their operations. They can be more commercial and say, you want this answer now, but it can come back a few seconds, a few minutes later. They can shift their loads geographically as well. So if you've got a lot of sun in Spain now, you can run your models in Spain as opposed to Scotland.
But just so we're clear for the audience that may not be following this so closely, there are a couple of flavors of AI data centers, and some that are involved in training, which can often be quite large, do have the ability to run loads a bit later. They don't have to be close to where the customers are. You can put them in Iceland or something, or in Spain where the wind is. But the actual use of the AI, is called the inference data centers, you typically do care about latency. When people want their answer, they want it now. The load has to run now, and they can often be in very high variability 1 second to the next in how those data centers run. Those are more demanding in some ways. And that's really and over time, people who are experts in this suggest to me, it might be 80 to 90% of the actual energy consumption from AI will come from the use of the AI, not the training of it. That's the experience with the internet and so on. In such a world, do we have an answer yet how to cope with those demands? What's your proposal?
So I think there's a combination of answers. One is the more consumer flexibility we have, we can help manage the power required by data centers when they need it. And if you look at the numbers, today in the world, we have 40 million consumer devices. By the end of this decade, there's going to be 200 million of those. That gives us an incredible resource for creating flexibility. If we can bundle that by placing data centers at the right locations where we have renewables and exploit the new flexibility that comes from data centers that train models as opposed to do high volume trading, then the combination of those, I think, gives us the two vectors to help solve the problem.
Okay. So you see in some ways an AI-enabled flexible energy system helping answer the challenges posed by AI centers.
Absolutely.
I just want to come to the audience for a quick question. If anyone has one, put your hand up. If not, okay, we have a lady near the front. Let's get a microphone. Just finish your thought.
Sure. And I was going to say the other benefit of the consumer devices is they give us incredible amount of data. So at Kraken today, we receive about 8 billion packets of data across the grid in the UK. That gives us the ability to model that with very granular precision, forecast the congestion, and then optimize devices to alleviate those. So I think and all of that data feeds into AI models that help us create the congestion forecasting. So that would be another big use for AI for us.
That's great. Thank you. Yes, please, let's come to you.
Hi, my name is Lavone, founder of a brand called El Saha. My question is, we speak about regulations quite a lot in energy transition, generally speaking. So whilst we understand the consumer needs to make the choice, as you've spoken about earlier, and it's not always the easiest choice, what is the role of regulators and policy writers in making sure that the transition actually happens and in a timely manner?
Yeah, I think we need to work very closely with the regulators. We, as in Kraken and other technology providers and utilities, because we're going through a phase of rapid change. Electricity system, as I mentioned, for 150, 70 years didn't change much. Whereas in the last decade, we've seen incredible amount of change with move to renewables, but also electrification of transport and heating. And in that world, as we hold a lot of the data, we need to share our models with regulators, work with them hand in hand in devising the next generation of regulation that we need to enable consumers to participate in the energy system and not sit across and throw stones at regulators saying, you're too slow, move faster.
We have a quick question in the back. Please, not much time left.
Yeah.
Your name, please?
One of the characteristics of...
who are you, sir?
David Manuel.
Welcome.
One of the characteristics of generation is the loss of energy through heat at the point of generation. And for AI, obviously, the heating effect of running the processes, and so the loss of energy there. Do you have any views or any plans to have an AI solution to harnessing that lost energy?
Great question.
Great.
Yeah, heat.
I'll give you my answer. I'd love to hear yours.
Okay, the heat is on.
So I've seen quite a few number of different models on this one. There are a couple of places in London where the data center is placed close to district heating networks.
Yep.
So that you could use the heat from the processing power into the district heating network. That works really well. There are projects in the Manchester area of using similar to boost the temperature in the district heating network. So yes, I think it's a really good solution, though I've not seen it at scale anywhere yet. I don't know if you have different experience.
Of course, if the energy that's produced is nuclear or renewables, you wouldn't have the combustion heat of the generation. That's one part of the answer. But the actual data centers, multiple pathways of cooling chips with liquid cooling, immersion cooling. I've traveled. Schneider Electric has a facility in Italy that I toured for very advanced technology for the next generation of Blackwell chips. That they're actually already doing this. And so I know there are multiple pathways for both reducing the amount of inefficiency and waste through better coding, better chips, better balance of plant design, better data center design, that would reduce that amount of heat generated in the first place. And secondly, also to recycle it. How do we use that heat in some cogeneration fashion or into district heating? So I think all of these things will come into play. And ultimately, I think there's a question here about the Jevons effect, which is the rebound effect. When things get cheaper, we tend to use more of them. Part of the answer is that we need to get even better at increasing the efficiency of making the AI so that the uses of AI can make the world better or worse. That's up to us. It's a double-edged sword, right? Like all new general purpose technologies. But there are many good things that AI can do in the world. It's certainly, the genie's not going back in the bottle. And happily, there are multiple pathways through innovation that we can see the production or manufacture of AI can continue to get more and more and more efficient, even radical breakthroughs in how we make it. So on that note, please join me in thanking Devrim for giving us a look into the future. Good to see you.